Okay, welcome again. So today we're going to talk about the philosophy of mind, very briefly, very superficially, because the mind is what produces intelligence in humans. So if we want to make intelligent robots, it's a good idea to try to understand what the mind is. Also, sometimes you remember, for example, in strong AI, we have the idea that we want to create a robot with a mind specifically, right? So then the question would be, what is this? What is a robot with a mind? Can I even create a mind or not? And this is where the philosophy of mind comes in. If we want to create robots with minds, or if we want to understand whether it's even possible to create a robot with a mind, it's a good idea to look at people who have thought about the mind even before AI existed, and these are the philosophers of mind. Of course, you could also look at other disciplines. You could look at neurophysiology, and to get some more ideas about what the mind might be. Okay, but we will not do that. We will now just talk about the philosophy of mind. And again, this will be very short. We are not going to become philosophers of mind. The philosophy of mind in itself is a big piece of philosophy where you could have a whole course for a semester or for a year dealing only with the philosophy of mind. So what we will do today in these few online lectures is a very short overview, right? We're not going to go into the depths of the things. But when you look at it from a very far away overview, then you find that there are essentially two different ways to talk about the mind. And the question is always, how do we relate the body to the mind? This is the main question of the philosophy of mind. Because we have the body, this is clear, we can see the body, we can touch it. We all know how the body works, more or less. We have a brain. We can open our skull, look inside, we can see the brain. When the brain is damaged, we know that our mental properties are also influenced. If I destroy the brain, then I also seem to be destroying the mind or the intelligence. If you have a stroke or a tumor in your brain, then this seems to affect the mind. So, and then on the other hand, the mind seems to affect the body, right? I can make a decision to drink a sip of coffee, and now after I made this decision with my mind, I'm able to influence my arm, and my arm will lift the cup, and so then I will have my coffee. So the question for the philosophy of mind is always, how does the mind relate to the body? The body is easy to see, is easy to understand how it works relatively, while the mind is somehow mysterious, right? I cannot see the mind. I cannot weigh it. I cannot say I have 20 grams of mind or something like that. So the question is, how do these things relate? And the one position is dualism. Dualism is the easiest to understand, is also historically the first and most, perhaps not historically the first if we go back to ancient Greece, but it is certainly the most common in Christian societies, right? The idea that mind is something that is separate from the body, and more strongly, substance dualism would say that I really have two kinds of substances. So one substance is what I can touch here, my skin, right? Is made up of cells, and the cells are made up of molecules, and the molecules are made of atoms, and the atoms are made of protons and neutrons and electrons, and these are made up from other things. This goes on for quite a while into physics, but we don't need to know that. The point is that we have a kind of physical material substance of which we are made. But then dualism would say, substance dualism would say, there is also another substance, and this other substance is mental substance. It is the substance that is responsible for thinking. Our thinking is itself a kind of substance. And obviously the most prominent group to advocate this, I already mentioned this, is Christian religion, right? all the religions that have that have originated together with Christianity, so Islam, the Jewish religion, they all have this idea that we have some kind of soul, or we have some kind of spirit that is given to us by God, and God makes us, creates us out of earth, right, out of soil essentially, and then puts the soul into this lifeless body that he creates, right? And so the soul is a separate thing, is a separate substance that goes into the lifeless body and then makes it be alive, right? And this is then substance dualism. There are two kinds of substances: mental substance, physical substance. I can also have a little more philosophically complicated idea that is called property dualism. This would say there are no two substances. All the substances are physical, but thoughts are non-physical properties of these physical substances. So there are some properties that are special for mental things. For example, the property to not have a weight, to not have a mass. And these properties are different from mental things than they are for physical things. We will see a little more about that in a moment. And then you have Epiphenomenalism. Epiphenomenalism is another position that says that what really drives us are only physical things. The brain is a physical thing, and the brain has physical properties, and the brain has physical reasons why it works in the way it works. But then by working through its operation, it creates thought. And the thought is what we perceive as our thoughts, or what we perceive as our identity, is created by the brain. And so the brain has an influence on the mind, but this mind doesn't have an influence back on the brain. So this says there's a one-way connection between brain and mind. Again, in a moment we will see this a little better, I think. And then we have so this is one kind of big division, right, between dualism. We have mental and physical substances, mental and physical properties. And the second big group is monism. Theories that say that there is only one kind of thing. There are not two things. There is no body and mind. There is only, for example, body. This would be physicalism. So if you are a physicalist, you would say all things are physical things. The mind does not really exist. There is nothing there. The mind is in reality only the working of the brain. You have a slight difference between physicalism and materialism, right? This is also a monism. It would say everything is material. The difference here, you can imagine the difference is materialism says everything is material. The physicalism says everything is a physical thing, obeying physical laws. But physical laws do not always talk about material things, right? We have physical laws, for example, about the spontaneous interaction between, in quantum mechanics, between different elementary particles. So you have two particles and you take them away from each other, and if they are entangled, in this way, like quantum physics wants it to be, then if something happens to one particle, the other particle will reflect this. And this spontaneous interaction of entangled particles is something that is physical. Physics describes it, and it obeys physical laws. But it is probably not material, right, in the sense that the interaction itself. The particles are material, the interaction is some kind of non-material, spontaneous interaction that happens between them. So something obeying physical law, or we have also electromagnetic waves, which you could also say perhaps they are not material. They are physical, but they are not material. Okay, and so when I talk about materialism, again, I can have different kinds of materialism. One is a reductive materialism, identity theory. And this says we can reduce all the different phenomena, the mind, the mental phenomena, we can reduce them to material phenomena. So we can describe them as material things. Identity theory, because it would say that the mental states are identical with physical states. So instead of talking of mental states, I can always talk about physical states and describe exactly the same things. Or eliminative materialism would say there are no mental states. It's not like I am describing them in physical terms, something that exists, but instead there is no mental state. This whole talk of mental states is just wrong. It's a misunderstanding of language. And so these are the main positions, perhaps, and in a moment we will talk of them in more detail. But in addition, we need also to understand functionalism. Functionalism is a kind of intermediate position that says that what is important for a mental state is not that it is made of a different substance or something, but what is important about it is that it is a state that has a particular function in the way the brain works. And the function of a state can be realized materially in different ways. So in the end, for a functionalist, it doesn't matter how the state is realized. It might be realized physically, materially. It might be realized in different ways physically. It might also be realized, in a dualist way, as long as the mental state has a particular function within the system of mental states. It is a mental state, and it doesn't matter what it is made of, right? So functionalism tries to steer away from this hard distinction between body and mind and say that it's a function that counts. It's not whether it's what it's made of, whether it's made of body or whether it's made of mind. So this is why this doesn't fit neatly into this dualism between body and mind. And we have the extended mind thesis, which again tries to complicate things in another way. The extended mind thesis says that perhaps the mind is more than just the brain. The mind is also all these things outside of us that contribute to the function of our brain. For example, for me now, these lecture notes that I am reading. I'm reading these lecture notes. If I didn't have the lecture notes, I would perhaps forget some of the things I want to say. If I forgot some things I want to say, then my mind would be less functioning. My mind can only achieve its full functioning, its full potential, in combination with external supports, like the lecture notes on my screen. And these external supports then should be considered a part of the mind, right? Okay, so this was the main overview. First, this you cannot understand yet properly, so I just wanted to give you a flavor of this. And now I will break the video here, and in the next video we will talk in more detail about this and about all of these, and you need to watch the next one in order to really get some understanding of what's happening. But first, try, after this video ends, perhaps go back to this point here, look at this list and try to roughly memorize the list so that later you're not confused, because later we are going to talk about, reductive materialism, eliminative materialism. You should at least be able to keep them apart without yet understanding the details, so that when we come back you have a rough idea that this is something that you've heard before, right? It's more efficient, I think, for complex topics to go in this iterative way, so you have an overview first and then you talk about the details, rather than directly jumping into the details. Okay, so I stop here, have a look at this, and meet me again for the next video in a moment. Thank you.